You're not gonna hear this version anywhere else, because right now, everyone's repeating headlines, but nobody's asking the real question. A fighter just pulled out of a UFC fight with a broken arm, and yeah, that's shocking, but that's not the story. The real story? What this does behind the scenes. Because while fans are reacting to the injury, something way bigger is quietly unfolding. Matchmakers are scrambling. Contracts are shifting. And there are fighters, big names, you didn't expect, suddenly getting calls. Now here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same time, things are heating up between Khamzat and Strickland. And this isn't just social media noise. If you've been paying attention, the tone has changed. This isn't hype anymore. This is personal. And when things get personal in this sport, the UFC doesn't slow it down, they accelerate it. So now you've got one fight collapsing, and another one potentially being pushed forward faster than planned. That's not coincidence. That's opportunity. And insiders are already hinting that what we're seeing right now could reshape an entire division overnight. But here's the twist nobody's talking about. There's a third name in the mix. A name that hasn't been mentioned publicly yet, but has everything to gain from this chaos. And if that move happens, forget everything you thought UFC 328 was going to look like, because the entire card flips. So don't blink, because what looks like bad news on the surface might actually be the start of one of the wildest shakeups we've seen this year. And trust me, this is only the beginning. You felt it the second the news dropped, right? That weird pause, that moment where something didn't quite add up. A fighter pulls out with a broken arm. On the surface, it's simple, it's unfortunate, it happens. But if you've followed this game long enough, you already know nothing in the UFC is ever just what it looks like. Injuries don't exist in a vacuum. They create ripples. And this one? This one hit at the exact wrong, or maybe the exact right time. Because while everyone's busy reacting to the headline, the real movement is happening where cameras don't go. Behind closed doors. Private calls. Last-minute negotiations. And that's where things start to get interesting. Think about the timing. A major fight card, high stakes, eyes locked in, and suddenly a slot opens. Not just any slot, a high-value position that the UFC cannot afford to leave weak. That's when the machine kicks in. Replacement talks don't start after the announcement. They start the moment there's even a hint something might go wrong. And trust me, fighters know this. Managers know this. There are guys who stay in camp year-round for this exact scenario. Waiting. Watching. Ready to jump in when chaos hits. So when you hear, broken arm, what you should really be hearing is, opportunity just opened. Now layer this on top of what's already been building between Khamzat Chimaev and Strickland. Because that situation? That's been simmering way longer than people realize. This isn't just two fighters trading words for clicks. The energy shifted recently. You can hear it in how they talk, how they respond, how quickly things escalate. There's less performance, more intention. And when fighters stop playing to the audience and start talking at each other, that's when it turns real. The UFC notices that. They love that. Because real tension sells better than anything scripted. Here's where it connects. One fight falls apart, and suddenly you've got a narrative that needs replacing. Not just a matchup, but a story. The UFC doesn't just build fights, they build moments. And right now, the tension between Khamzat and Strickland is sitting there like a loaded weapon. The kind of fight that doesn't need a long promo tour. The kind where fans are already emotionally invested. So what happens when the promotion sees a gap on a major card and a ready-made storyline gaining heat at the same time? They don't wait. They move. But don't assume it's that straightforward. Because if it were, you'd already have an official announcement. And you don't, which means something else is happening in the background. Something more complicated. Because stepping into a fight like this isn't just about willingness, it's about leverage. Fighters negotiate harder when they know the UFC needs them. Pay changes. Contract terms shift. Future guarantees get discussed. This is where careers can quietly level up overnight without fans even realizing it. And that's why this situation feels different. Because there's another layer nobody's openly talking about yet. A third angle that hasn't hit headlines, but is definitely in motion. There's always that one name, the wild card. The fighter who wasn't originally part of the conversation, but suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Maybe they've been on a win streak. Maybe they've been calling people out and getting overlooked. Or maybe they're just in the perfect position at the perfect time. That's how breakout moments are born in this sport. Not always through planning, but through disruption. And disruption is exactly what we're looking at right now. The UFC thrives on unpredictability. It's not a flaw in the system, it is the system. Cards change, opponents switch, narratives flip overnight. But every once in a while, there's a moment where all of that chaos lines up in a way that reshapes more than just one fight. It shifts rankings. It creates new rivalries. It fast-tracks contenders. And if you're paying close attention, you can almost see it forming before it officially happens. Right now, we're in that window. A broken arm might have been the trigger, but it's not the main event of this story. It's the spark. What comes next depends on decisions being made in real time by people who understand exactly how big this opportunity is. Fighters are making calls. Managers are pushing angles. And the UFC is watching everything, calculating the move that delivers maximum impact. So while everyone else is reacting to what just happened, the smarter move is to watch what happens next. Because this isn't just about a fight falling apart. It's about what rises in its place. And if you've seen enough of these moments, you already know, this is where things start getting unpredictable. Now here's where the situation starts tightening instead of clearing up. Because when a replacement fight doesn't get announced immediately, that usually means multiple options are being tested at the same time. The UFC isn't scrambling blindly. They're comparing outcomes. They're asking one key question: which move creates the biggest reaction? Not just from hardcore fans, but from the wider audience that tunes in when something feels unpredictable. And right now, unpredictability is exactly what's driving attention. A late replacement can either weaken a card, or turn it into something people have to watch just to see what happens. That's why timing matters more than anything. If this was a straightforward injury with an easy backup plan, you'd already see contracts signed and headlines locked in. But the delay tells you negotiations are layered. One fighter might be ready but asking for more money. Another might be the perfect stylistic matchup but needs extra time. And then there's always that one option the UFC is hesitant about. Not because it's bad, but because it's too disruptive. The kind of move that changes rankings, reshuffles future matchups, and forces the promotion to rewrite plans they've been building for months. And that brings everything back to Khamzat Chimaev and Strickland. Because their situation isn't just sitting on the side, it's hovering over all of this. If you plug either of them into this opening, the stakes instantly change. Not just for the card, but for the division. Khamzat carries that unpredictable, high-pressure style that makes every fight feel dangerous from the first second. Strickland brings a completely different energy, relentless pace, sharp pressure, and a personality that keeps fans locked in whether they agree with him or not. Put either of them into a late-notice scenario, and suddenly the narrative becomes bigger than the original matchup ever was. But here's the complication. Both of these fighters operate from positions of leverage. Khamzat isn't just looking for fights. He's looking for defining moments. Strickland isn't stepping in unless it makes sense for his trajectory. So the UFC has to balance urgency with long-term value. They can't just throw a fight together. They need a fight that feels like it belongs at this level. That's where negotiations slow things down, because every option on the table has consequences that extend far beyond one night. Meanwhile, fighters outside the spotlight are watching this unfold in real time. This is the moment where careers can change direction instantly. One call, one acceptance, one strong performance, and suddenly someone goes from being on the edge of relevance to being part of the main conversation. That's why you'll often hear about fighters saying yes before the offer is even official. They understand the window is small. Hesitate for even a few hours, and the opportunity passes to someone else who's willing to take the risk. And make no mistake, this is a risk-heavy situation. Taking a fight on short notice isn't just about courage, it's about calculation. Weight cuts become tighter. Game plans become simpler. Conditioning gets tested in ways a full camp would normally prepare for. But sometimes, that's exactly what creates unforgettable performances. Fighters who step in under pressure often fight with a different kind of urgency. Less hesitation, more instinct. That's the kind of energy fans remember. Now add one more layer to this. The UFC isn't just thinking about this event, they're thinking 2 or 3 events ahead. Every decision they make here affects future matchups, title contention, and even pay-per-view momentum. So if they insert the wrong fighter into this slot, they could accidentally stall a bigger fight they've been building toward. But if they choose correctly, they can accelerate everything. One bold move can set up multiple storylines at once. And that's why this moment feels like a turning point rather than just a replacement situation. Because behind the scenes, it's not just about filling a gap, it's about choosing a direction. Do they go safe and preserve the structure they already have? Or do they take advantage of the chaos and create something bigger, something louder, something that shifts the conversation across the entire division? Right now, there's no clear answer publicly. But the silence itself is telling. It means decisions are still being weighed carefully. It means multiple fighters are still in play. And it means the final outcome might not be the one people expect. So while fans are refreshing for updates and waiting for confirmation, the real story is still unfolding in private. Calls are still happening. Deals are still being shaped. And somewhere in all of that, one decision is about to change everything. Not just for this fight card, but for everyone connected to it. And when that decision finally surfaces, it's going to feel sudden, like it came out of nowhere. But in reality, it's being built right now, move by move, conversation by conversation, until the moment the UFC decides it's ready to flip the switch. What makes this moment even more intense is how quickly perception can flip once the UFC makes its move. Right now, everything feels uncertain, almost chaotic. But the second an announcement drops, the narrative will lock into place like it was always meant to happen this way. That's how the promotion operates. What looks like disruption behind the scenes suddenly becomes the plan in the public eye, and fans run with it. But if you've been paying attention up to this point, you already know better. You know this is being shaped in real time, with multiple moving pieces still shifting under the surface. The pressure isn't just on the UFC, it's on the fighters being considered. Because saying yes in a moment like this isn't just about stepping into the cage. It's about stepping into uncertainty. You're potentially facing an opponent you didn't prepare for, under a spotlight that just got brighter overnight, with expectations that weren't originally yours to carry. That kind of situation can expose weaknesses fast, but it can also create something special. Some of the most memorable moments in MMA history didn't come from perfectly planned camps. They came from fighters embracing chaos and turning it into opportunity. And that's exactly what's hanging in the air right now around names like Khamzat Chimaev and Strickland. Because if either of them steps into this shifting situation, the tone of the entire event changes instantly. Khamzat brings that sense of danger. Every second feels like it could end abruptly. Strickland brings pressure, durability, and a mindset that thrives in uncomfortable fights. But beyond their styles, it's their presence that matters. These aren't fighters who quietly fill a gap. These are fighters who take over the conversation. Still, there's a reason nothing has been confirmed yet. Big names come with big consequences. If you move Khamzat into this slot, you might delay another matchup fans have been anticipating. If you insert Strickland, you could disrupt a different storyline that's already in motion. The UFC has to weigh all of that carefully. They're not just building a card, they're maintaining an ecosystem where every fight connects to the next. One unexpected change can ripple through multiple divisions, affecting rankings, contender status, and future title fights. At the same time, there's always that looming possibility that the UFC goes in a completely different direction. Not the obvious names, not the ones trending online, but someone unexpected, someone ready to seize the moment without hesitation. That's the wild card scenario that often catches fans off guard. Because while everyone debates the biggest names, the UFC sometimes chooses the fighter who's simply the most available, the most prepared, and the most willing to say yes without conditions. And if that happens, it introduces a completely different kind of energy. Now the story shifts from star power to unpredictability, from expectation to curiosity. Fans start asking new questions. Who is this fighter? Can they handle the pressure? Is this the beginning of something bigger? That curiosity can be just as powerful as hype, sometimes even more. Because when expectations are unclear, anything feels possible. There's also another layer that doesn't get talked about enough: the psychological side of all this. Fighters who step into late notice opportunities often carry a different mindset into the cage. There's less overthinking, less pressure to execute a perfect game plan, and more reliance on instinct. That can lead to performances that feel raw and unpredictable. And in a sport where anything can happen in a single exchange, that unpredictability becomes incredibly dangerous. Meanwhile, the fans are watching all of this unfold in fragments. A report here, a rumor there, a social media post that hints at something without confirming anything. It creates this sense of anticipation that keeps building with every passing hour. And the longer the silence stretches, the more intense that anticipation becomes. Because people start to feel like something big is coming. They just don't know what it is yet. That's where we are right now. Right in the middle of uncertainty, right before clarity. And historically, this is the exact point where the UFC tends to make its boldest moves. Not when everything is stable, but when everything is in flux. Because that's when they have the most freedom to reshape the narrative. To take a situation that started as a setback and turn it into something that feels even bigger than the original plan. So when the announcement finally hits, and it will, it's not just going to answer questions. It's going to create new ones. New matchups to consider. New rivalries to watch. New stakes that didn't exist just days ago. And that's the real story here. Not the injury. Not the withdrawal. But the transformation that follows. Because in the UFC, moments like this don't just fill gaps, they redefine them. And what we're about to see next could very easily shift the direction of this division in a way no one fully saw coming, until it was already happening. And just when it feels like everything should finally settle, this is usually the point where things take one more unexpected turn. Because the UFC rarely lets a situation like this resolve in a straight line. There's always that final adjustment, the one that nobody fully anticipates, that changes how the entire story is remembered. Right now, we're at that edge. The moment where decisions are close, but not locked. Where one phone call, one agreement, or even one hesitation can redirect everything. What's fascinating is how quickly momentum shifts once a direction is chosen. A fighter who wasn't even part of the conversation suddenly becomes the focus. A matchup that seemed unlikely starts feeling inevitable. And just like that, the narrative flips. Fans who were confused hours ago become convinced this was the best possible outcome all along. That's the power of timing and presentation. The UFC doesn't just announce fights. They frame them in a way that makes them feel urgent, necessary, and impossible to ignore. Now bring the spotlight back to Khamzat Chimaev and Strickland, because whether they end up directly involved or not, their presence is shaping the decisions being made. When fighters like that are circling around a situation, it raises the stakes automatically. Even the possibility of their involvement forces the UFC to think bigger. Because if there's a chance to turn a disrupted card into a headline-grabbing moment, they're going to explore it from every angle before committing to something smaller. But here's where the tension really builds. The longer the UFC waits to confirm the replacement, the more it signals that they're aiming for something significant. Quick replacements usually mean safe choices. Delayed announcements often mean negotiations are stretching towards something more impactful. And that impact isn't just about who steps in. It's about what that choice sets up next. Every fight is a piece of a larger puzzle, and right now they're trying to place a piece that connects multiple paths at once. At the same time, fighters are dealing with their own internal decisions. This isn't just business, it's personal risk. Accepting a fight like this can elevate a career instantly, but it can also derail momentum just as quickly. That's why some fighters hesitate while others jump at the opportunity. It's a split-second calculation between risk and reward. And in a sport this unpredictable, that calculation doesn't always follow logic. Sometimes it comes down to instinct. The same instinct that drives them once the cage door closes. There's also the question of preparation. A full training camp allows fighters to build strategy, condition their bodies, and fine-tune every detail. But a short-notice fight strips all of that down to the essentials. You rely on what you already have. Your habits, your reactions, your ability to adapt under pressure. That's why these situations often produce performances that feel different. Less polished, but more intense. More immediate. And for fans, that raw intensity can be more compelling than anything perfectly planned. Meanwhile, the conversation outside the cage keeps evolving. Analysts speculate. Fans debate. Social media amplifies every rumor, every hint, every possibility. It creates this constant hum of anticipation that keeps growing the longer things remain unresolved. And in a way, that anticipation becomes part of the event itself. By the time the fight is officially announced, people aren't just interested, they're invested. They've followed the twists, the uncertainty, the build-up that wasn't originally supposed to exist. And that's what makes this situation stand out. It started as a disruption, something that could have weakened the card. But instead, it's turning into something else entirely. Something layered, something unpredictable, something that feels like it's evolving in real time. The kind of scenario where the outcome isn't just about who wins or loses, but about how the entire story unfolds from here. Because once the decision is finalized, everything accelerates. Promotion kicks in, narratives sharpen, fighters shift from uncertainty to focus, and the energy that's been building quietly behind the scenes suddenly becomes visible all at once. That's when fans realize this wasn't just a last-minute change. It was the start of something bigger. And if you've been tracking every detail up to this point, you'll recognize it immediately. This isn't chaos anymore. It's direction. A direction shaped by timing, opportunity, and a willingness to take risks when the moment demands it. And those are the moments that define this sport. Not the ones that go exactly as planned, but the ones that force everyone involved to adapt, to adjust, and to rise to a situation they didn't see coming. So as we get closer to the final announcement, understand what you're really watching unfold. Not just a replacement fight, but a shift in momentum. A moment where the UFC takes something unexpected and turns it into something unforgettable. And when it all comes together, it won't feel like a backup plan. It'll feel like it was meant to happen this way all along. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just another fight update. It's a moment that could flip everything we thought we knew about this division. And here's the thing. Situations like this don't stay unclear for long. When the UFC finally pulls the trigger, it happens fast. And if you're not paying attention, you miss the shift completely. That's why you need to stay locked in right now. So here's what I want you to do. Don't just watch this unfold from the outside. Get involved. Drop your prediction before the official announcement hits. Who steps in? Does this open the door for a bigger fight than we expected? Or does the UFC go with a wild card that shocks everyone? I'm telling you, the people who call it early are the ones who really understand how this game works. And more importantly, stay connected. Because the second something breaks, real updates, not recycled headlines, you're going to want it instantly, not hours later when everyone's already caught up. This is one of those rare moments where being early actually matters. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep your eyes on this, because the next move doesn't just affect one fight, it could reshape everything that comes after it. And when it finally drops, we're coming right back here to break it all down. Don't blink.